Hello and welcome. I'm Kate Creedon, and for the next half an hour or so, I'm going to take you on a journey around the country. Have you ever thought about packing up and heading off on an adventure? Maybe you're hoping to see the country, meet some new people, and get paid while doing it. Well, this may be the start of that adventure. Most of you are probably already pretty familiar with CQ Nurse, part of Health Solutions Group Australia, which places nurses like you in rural and remote locations all over Australia. So to find out what it's really like working in a remote community, let me introduce you to our panel. First, I'd like to introduce Bec. Bec hails from the Gold Coast originally, but she's a country nurse at heart. And since joining CQ Nurse in 2015, she's worked all over, mostly in Director of Nursing and management positions. Thanks for joining us, Bec. We also have Tessa with us. Tessa left the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand 6 years ago and has never looked back. Tessa is living life to the fullest. She's into extreme sports and is learning to fly a helicopter. She's also a bit of a hero among her colleagues at CQ Nurse after photobombing a Prime Minister, but I'll let her tell you a little bit about that later. Hi there, Tessa. I'd also like to introduce John. John was a lifelong emergency nurse in a regional hospital in New South Wales who up stumps a few years back and set off with CQ Nurse. Welcome, John. And we also have Naomi. Now, Naomi's a registered nurse and recruitment consultant with CQ Nurse who will be able to answer all of your questions and talk us through the process of starting work in rural, remote communities. Hi there, Naomi. Now, Naomi, I think I might start with you. If you want to get into rural and remote work, but have never done it before, how do you get started?
So clinical skills are definitely important. And so we usually look at what people have done, what their experience is, and then where they want to go and see how we can marry that up in terms of where we can send them out and about to work. So in terms of clinical skills, depending on where you go, they do have different requirements. So working out in a remote clinic has a lot more clinical requirements than working in a regional or a rural hospital. So depending on where you wanted to go, those skills do differ. We will send through a link at the end that has a whole list of courses that people do look for in terms of those clinical skills for remote areas. In terms of other attributes that we want to see in people, we would love to see people who are flexible and confident in their ability to be able to hit the ground running. Sometimes you get a good orientation where you go and sometimes you don't, and so you really need to just be able to walk in and get on with the job. And then in terms of if you've never actually done this type of work before, that's okay, because as I said, you come to us, we look at what you've done and we look at where you want to go, and then we would try to progress you through a series of contracts that would allow you to build skills, competence and confidence in that to be able to go and work in those rural and remote environments. If you want to work remote but have never had that experience, I often encourage people to think of it more as a longer term goal. We're not in the business of just plonking you out somewhere and saying, hey, no worries, we'll talk to you in 12 weeks when you finish. But we would probably aim to transition you through to a regional hospital and then go to a rural hospital where you've always got someone else around. There's always a doctor on call. And if it's all going well, move you to more of a remote hospital where you still do have that medical coverage, but you're getting exposure to that cultural side of things, which is often really important in those remote areas. And if everything is going well and you're loving it, then yeah, we'll look into getting you into those clinic environments where there's only nurses and no doctors. And then, yeah, we can kind of keep going smaller and smaller if everything is working out for you.
So what locations does CQ Nurse cover?
Yep, so in terms of rural and regional hospitals, well, we do regional, rural and remote Australia. So that's our focus. We don't do metropolitan areas. So anything outside metro areas we do look at. At the moment, our most popular states would be New South Wales, Queensland, Northern Territory and WA, because the nature of agency nursing is it does chop and change a little bit. That does change, but at the moment, that is where we see the majority of our work.
Now let's bring in our nurses. I might ask you guys, where are you dialing in from and how long have you been working there? So I'll start with you, Bec.
So I'm dialing in from a small clinic in Western Queensland. I came here for 6 weeks and then COVID hit, so I've been here 6 months. So I finish up in a couple of weeks to have some time off before heading back to the territory.
And what about you, John?
I'm in a small remote country hospital in southern New South Wales. I've been here for a couple of months. I've been floating around these small hospitals for the last 7 months, but getting used to the cold.
And Tessa, where are you tonight?
I'm in the lovely warm far north Queensland, in a little rural hospital. So yeah, beautiful and warm here.
I love it. Everyone's from all over the place. But Bec, you're originally from the Gold Coast, and I can imagine it must have been pretty daunting when you first joined CQ Nurse. How have you found it?
Yeah, look, it's been fantastic. It's been an amazing experience. I was working in a rural hospital at the time as a clinical nurse specialist, and I sort of got to the point of I really wanted to just do more and go bush. And I rang around a few agencies, but CQ seemed to have this program, like Naomi was saying before, where you start small until you get to that real remote, isolated communities. And I really love that approach, so that's what I did. And so yes, it's very different to Gold Coast Byron Bay, but I love it. And as soon as I get out west and out into the bush, I just feel relaxed, and it's just a new adventure.
Tessa, you were a nurse in a regional hospital before you moved across the ditch to Australia. Are you glad you made that move?
Absolutely. Oh, it was the best thing I ever did. The experiences I've had, it's been amazing, and CQ have been brilliant. What they do, when I first got it the first few years here, what they'd done for me was they would tell me about the position and then tell me about what was in the area that I could go and sightsee and do. So they would sell the area for me, which was really awesome.
And John, can I ask you, you've spent your career in a busy emergency department. Why did you make the move to CQ Nurse, and how does it compare?
Well, I guess after a lifetime of it, perhaps I was starting to feel a bit jaded, a bit stuck in a rut. Travelling around is something I've always dreamed of doing. The stresses and strains of the constant ED work was getting to me, so I joined CQ and I liberated myself. It's been marvellous. I was very nervous at first to take that step from the regional or the city ED out to the country, but with CQ's support, it was a seamless transition, and I've grown. I've wound the clock back. I feel much better. It's great. It's great.
Well, Bec, you talked about how you hit the road and you start to relax, but what was it about this type of work that attracted you?
I think when you're working in a hospital, you're working in one area. And I think going remote, and eventually my goal was to be remote, but I think it gives you the opportunity to do everything. So, in the morning, you could potentially be delivering a baby, and in the afternoon, you could potentially be dealing with a heart attack, and lots of different things in between. And I am a community-focused person, and I really wanted to be able to do all of those skills. But also my husband and I have been on the road together now for nearly 5 years. And we just love it because we can say, yeah, we're going to work for 3 months and then have 3 months off to travel and enjoy the country and all the stories that we've learned from the local people in that area. And I find that a really fascinating part of being a remote area nurse or being an agency nurse. That, like John said, it's not like turning up to the same hospital day in, day out, or night after night, and just having a bit more of a lifestyle. Like my husband and I call it lifestyling, and so CQ allows us to do that.
We do.
But Tessa, it sounds like you've also seen so much of Australia in the time that you've been living here. But what would you say is like the most memorable place that you've worked, and why?
It's really hard because there's so many different places, but I have to admit probably the highlight for me was I delivered a foal when I was working on an island. Someone ran into the hospital.
Not quite the brief, is it?
No, and I know nothing about foals, and so I had to call a friend from Mackay to find out what to do, but it was on a night shift, and just a local ran in and said, you need to help this horse, and it's like, oh, okay. So no, that was certainly an experience.
And also I'm sorry, I hope you don't mind, but you also ended up photobombing Tony Abbott. Tell me, how did that happen?
Well, CQ put out, I was working on an island, and CQ put out that, he was visiting, and they were first prize for anyone that could get a photo with him. And a lot of the nurses went down and he refused. So I thought, well, no, not going to happen. So I decided to photobomb him. And I had to admit, all my girlfriends took off. I didn't know how to do selfies. So I managed to find a stranger in the crowd and said, look, I'm sneaking up, going to fling around. Can you take the photo? And it worked.
Oh, wow. So good. And also, John, you also had an experience very early on, just how diverse it can be working in a remote area as a nurse. Tell me a little bit about that first experience.
Yeah, well, my first experience, I'm in a little country hospital. I'm still in city mode, and maybe it was my second or third day there, and this old guy walked in, staggered in through the door. I jumped up, hello, how can I help you? And he said, I've come for my firewood. Oh, your firewood? That's different. And I asked a couple of questions and was told, oh, yes, that's right. Here's the phone number, order his firewood, and he'll be sweet, he'll go then. You know what, afterwards I thought, yeah, this is for me. It was just marvellous. I couldn't believe it. So, yeah, that was my first experience.
Yeah, certainly a varied sort of role that you have when you are in these communities. Bec, you sort of touched on it a little bit earlier, but how big a jump was it going from a metropolitan area into this rural and remote, or even just to a regional hospital?
Yeah, to leave a full-time position and to say, yep, I'm going to do this was terrifying. But, CQ were really great. They were really supportive. I did some education before going to my first placement, which was Rockhampton. So it was still quite a big, sort of almost big rural regional hospital. But having to do it on my own, because up until then I'd been a mum of 3, and had never been married since I was 18 with children. So it was the first time I'd ever been on my own as well. And then from there, we just went smaller and smaller, more education, updating my skills constantly, because I had my end goal there. So yeah, and so it was really good. So by the time I got to a very isolated remote community, I felt comfortable and confident in my skills to be able to achieve whatever came through the door. Yeah.
So I'd imagine one of the hardest parts of this job is actually leaving your friends and your family and heading off alone, but that hasn't been the case for you, Bec, has it?
No, so I did that for the first year until we sold the house, renovated, and then we sold the house, and my husband came along with us. So I've had my husband as on the road with us for the last 4 years. So the first couple of years was in a rooftop tent, and then we just upgraded to an Ocker. So we had a heap of fun.
And how does he find it?
He loves
Obviously, he's not in the same work as you, or how does he enjoy it?
He's actually a carpenter by trade, and often we end up in very remote, isolated Indigenous communities, and I usually go in as the manager now. So I end up hiring him because normally there's so many positions that are unfilled. So he ends up coming along, and then we pop him on the books, and he'll do cleaning, or he'll do admin, or second responder. And then community will say, hey, you've got a tool trailer, and he'll go out and teach the young ones how to make stuff, put things together in other times, like in his free time. So, and of course, they all take him fishing while I work. So, yeah.
Sounds like he's having a great time. Well, Tessa, do you find with the job, is there much flexibility? I mean, have you had much time to travel around and see the area? You know, and what about if you want to take time off to see family and friends?
Well, that's the beauty of agency nursing. Like normally after a contract, I'll take a week or two off. So I haven't had to book holidays for 6 years. It's been great. Normally within the hospital itself, they're always awesome. I'll say to them, I want to go camping here, I want to go and do this. So they'll just organise the rosters for you. I do a lot of Tessa's Tiki tours. We try and get other agency nurses. We went off on a little tour a couple of days ago to some waterfalls. So we all try and get out, you know, to get away and have a look and see what's out there. So no, you know, the mums here are really good because they want you to see the countryside as well. You'll go back and tell people, wow, you should have seen what it was like up there. So yeah.
I can imagine there's not that much nightlife in some of these communities.
No, I did notice that. I had to borrow a shirt because I've just brought up t-shirts and shorts. That's sort of all you need up these areas. So.
Is that a surprise when you arrive in these areas, just, you know, how remote you actually are?
The first time I went to a very remote area, yes, it was a real culture shock. I'd brought a handbag and I'd brought all sorts of things, and I was there for 3 months. When I left, I had grey hair. My toenails were terrible because, I mean, they haven't got hairdressers, pedicures here. Got surprised at the cost of food. That was a big thing, and little of it. But you learn to become very resourceful. And you can see why it's so expensive, you know, to be able to get it up to these parts, you know. But yeah, no, you do become very resourceful, and you do appreciate going back to the city. I'm going back in 3 weeks. I can't wait. I've made the hairdressing appointment and everything else. But then after 3 days, I'm ready to go again.
Got your priorities right. I love it. Well, John, what does your family think of you know, what you're doing? And you know, when we spoke, you said in the later part of your career as well.
Yeah, well, my wife, she'll come and visit. We make it work. We make it fun. So she'll either come and visit me at where I am on a contract, or we'll meet halfway. If I've got some days off, we'll find somewhere where we can both get to. So we make fun of it, you know. It's good fun. We both enjoy it. It's good.
So I've heard a little bit about what it's like working for CQ Nurse, but Naomi, for someone who's thinking of joining, and you sort of did touch on this, but exactly what requirements do you need?
Yeah, so initially we like people to send us through their CV, and then we make sure, like, we put everyone through an onboarding process that includes checking your immunisations, police check, clinical references, things like that. The most important general onboarding requirement would be 2 years of clinical experience post-grad. And so, as I said before, regardless of what your experience is, if you are wanting to do this and you come to us, we can look at what you've done and where you want to go and see if we can kind of marry that up in terms of the work that we do. If you haven't had your 2 years post-grad experience, don't fret, because if you still do want to go rural and remote, at some point in your career, it still might be worth chatting to us, because then we can give you some advice in terms of experience, clinical experience to seek out, and some professional development in which you can look for. If you want to go into more those remote areas like where Bec is, you definitely need to have had some emergency experience, because you could be, dealing with cardiac or a road trauma or a baby being born. So you've really got to be prepared for a whole gamut of presentations. And so most facilities also request that you've got an advanced life support certificate, a current driver's license, because in some of these places you are required to drive the four-wheel drive ambulance to go out and pick people up wherever they might be. So they would be the most, important kind of requirements that we kind of look for when onboarding people. But yeah, if people haven't had that emergency experience, we still have midwives and theatre nurses and mental health nurses and renal nurses and a whole bunch of other nurses that still go and work in regional and rural areas doing a whole range of jobs. So yeah, have a chat to us, and we can look at what you've done and how we might be able to map out a path for you to get where you want to go. And if you do start kind of going down that track and start going out and about and realize that it's not for you, then that's okay. That's okay too, because, we still need nurses in metro areas. And we do have, some nurses that do some metro work and some nurses that do, and then, they'll do a little bit of metro work and then they jump off and do a rural or remote contract. They get that fixed for a couple of months and then they head back and do shift fills in their metro environment. So, because we are part of a bigger national family of agencies, we can kind of assist with work in that area, even though it's not our core focus.
So Naomi, we do have one question from Amy who's listening in. She wants to know, post-grad, is that a post-bachelor's degree or a post-grad certificate?
So that's just when we say 2 years clinical experience post-grad, we just mean 2 years clinical experience since you finished your bachelor's. So if you get into somewhere and do your grad program for a year and then do another year on top of that, so 2 years clinical experience post your bachelor degree. Yeah.
And Kim also wants to know, is there opportunities for midwives?
Absolutely. I can honestly say that we never have enough midwives for the number of positions that we get through. And yeah, the experience for them can be varied as well, because it can be in a regional hospital, it can be in a rural hospital where they do a bit of midwifery and they do a bit of everything else. Or we do have some community kind of midwifery positions, or there's even sometimes remote area midwives that are needed in the Northern Territory to provide that community midwifery service.
And qualifications aside, what qualities specifically are you looking for in nurses?
I guess the first one that always comes to mind is flexibility. So when you come to us and you want to go and do these great, fantastic things that these guys speak about, being flexible with regards to where you go and what you do is definitely one thing we do look for. You need to be confident in your ability and to be able to hit the ground running. We do send staff to very isolating, at times they can go to very isolating environments where phone reception might not be good, if any, or the internet could be patchy. So you kind of need to be comfortable with your own company after hours, because if you go to places like where Bec is, you know, it is her and her husband, so lucky Bec. But yeah, if you're out in those remote environments, you might not have a big bunch of people that you work with. So, and I guess support from your family and friends back home is really important too, because they need to understand the type of environments that you are going out to work in, and that you might not be able to call home or check home every day. And I think John kind of mentioned it a little bit, but one important aspect of what the work that CQ Nurse does is about supporting people out and about on contract. And it's honestly one of the favourite things that I love about my job, and it's why I have done it for so long, is we do keep in touch with you while you're out and about on contract to make sure you're feeling supported and you're coping in the work environment that you're in. Sometimes you just need someone to bounce ideas off, or to debrief with, or just simply chat, or send us photos of what you've done on your days off. We love it. That's 100% what we're here for. And when we hear about your experiences, we feel part of it, and that makes the job we do very satisfying.
Well, Nira Shani wants to know, are there any opportunities for new graduates?
So we don't actually cater for new grads, purely because of that. When you're an agency nurse, you might not get a very good orientation, and there is that expectation that you will hit the ground running, regardless of whether you're in a regional hospital or you're in a smaller hospital. And so as a new grad, there might not be that clinical support that you need when you are fresh out of uni. So we do encourage people to try and do a grad program, and then do one more year in which they can really solidify their skills, and then absolutely we can look into getting them out and about. But as I said, if this is something you really do want to do down the track, it is part of your long-term goal, then talk to us and tap into some of the resources that we might be able to pop in front of you, because it will kind of help give you direction in terms of what courses to look out for, what professional development to tap into, you know, where do you do an immunisation course when that's a requirement to go to the Northern Territory, things like that. So we can't offer work for new grads, but we can certainly, you know, help by offering you a little bit of guidance here and there with where you might be able to locate or tap into those resources.
Barbara also has a really good question. Is there much demand for remote working, and could you find yourself without work for lengthy periods?
So we always have work. Where it does vary, because that's the nature of agency nursing. So the more flexible people are with what they want to do and where they want to go is certainly advantageous. If you've never had emergency experience, we're not going to plonk you down in the middle of somewhere and hope for the best. So we're only going to place you in areas in which you can use your experience and then, you know, use the skills you've already got plus learn new ones. So there is work. It does vary where it is. In terms of, do we always have work? I always say that agency nursing is a real gamble. It's a game, because if you say, you know, you might get offered a contract and then you don't know whether to take it, or do you wait for something better? Like, what do you do? So, or if you say no, will there be anything else? Or when you say yes to something, then a better one comes up, or whatever it is. So it is a real game. It's a real gamble. So if people can, I do encourage them to either keep a casual home base where they are, and we have New Zealand nurses that do this. They stay casual in New Zealand at their hospital and then come over and do contracts, or they can join one of if their home base is metro, where there is the opportunity to do shift fills. with one of those other agencies that fall under the same umbrella as CQ Nurse, then that can be an option too, where they can still do shifts when they're at home, or if they've got birthday parties or weddings or lots of things on, they're not without work because they can work while they're at home, and then they can jump out and about and do contracts. So, you know, you can work contracts around your life and also work your life around contracts, as Tessa does perfectly.
And Shona wants to know, as an older nurse, do you have age limits?
Absolutely, we don't have age limits at all. The only thing we do ask is that, you know, when we're bringing people on board, as long as they are physically and mentally healthy enough to fulfill the roles and responsibilities of a registered nurse, and they can work within their scope of practice, then they are, you know, that's what we want in our registered nurses. So we don't look at ages. We don't only offer work to a certain demographic. We are more interested in skills and experience and what you might be able to offer to all of the wonderful places that we send people out and about.
Brodie's got a good question. Do most contracts offer accommodation? And if you're travelling with a partner, are they able to stay with you?
Yes. So first part of that one, accommodation. So generally speaking, accommodation is included as part of your contract. So this can vary greatly depending on where you are going. And these other panelists will be, you know, could probably tell you 17,000 stories about the types of accommodation in all of the places that they've gone to. So some might be nurses' quarters, some might be a house or a townhouse that may be shared with other agency nurses or other staff. We do have people that travel with partners, and then not all places can accommodate them. Some can, some can't. So if just depending on where you're going or where you want to go, that accommodation for partners may be able to be included. Or if people have, you know, we have a bunch of people that have a caravan or a camper. So if they go to somewhere that can accommodate partners, then they stay in the accommodation. But if they go somewhere that can't accommodate partners, they just stay at the local caravan park in their caravan or their camper.
This is an interesting question. I mean, what's the best advice you give to nurses about how to settle into a remote and rural community, and what do you pack?
These guys might be able to offer their best tips, I guess. But one thing people often don't think about is if they're going remote, they might have to get on a plane that has a very strict luggage allowance. And as Tessa said, the shops are sometimes don't offer a huge range of grocery items or things like that. So, you know, you might not need to take your fancy handbags or your hair straightener, but throwing in some, you know, packets of rice or tuna or I read somewhere that one of our nurses takes all their own spices to every contract. So regardless of what they can buy at the shop, they can you know, flavour it up with spices that they bring from home. One other really important point, I think, is when you go into some of these rural or remote places, they might not have the recycling centres that we're used to in bigger places. And so we don't want to generate a huge amount of waste and leave a whole bunch of things in the community that are going to be there for years and years to come for all other nurses to see blowing down the street when they're there. So being able to take things like a shampoo or conditioner bar instead of the bottles of shampoo and conditioner, it's lighter to take on the plane, it's got less waste, and it actually goes that little bit further. So some nurses say they always take their e-reader or their Kindle, a camera, and a good hat. Someone said they always take their own good coffee supply because they know they won't get that in those areas. So yeah, everyone, I guess, has there, and as you travel and go from place to place, you do learn, yes, I need to take that, or no, I don't need to take that. So yeah, there's so many blogs out there about eco-friendly packing or packing light, and so yeah, if they're probably worth having a read of in preparation for going out to these places in terms of what to take or what not to take.
Do you guys, can I open that up to our nurses? I mean, Tessa, John, Bec, maybe we'll start with you, Tessa. Is there something that you always pack and something you've learnt to leave behind?
Definitely conditioner, because normally I'm coastal and I end up with pet knots. So they don't have a large supply of conditioner in a lot of the remote areas. So I end up with, 5 huge knots by the time I get back to main centre. Coffee, always take coffee and a plunger. That's always a must-do pack. But as far as clothes, just depends, whether you're warm or cold. I haven't worked in a cold area. CQ have been wonderful and left me in my jandals all year round for the last 6 years. So it's always shorts and t-shirts. So
what about you, John?
Yeah, well, I don't need conditioner, but 2 bags. I always take 2 bags.
2 bags.
Yeah,
So
2 bags and tins of tuna.
And Bec?
I'm coffee. So if kilo limit and I fly into some islands, I try and take as less clothing as possible because it's just me there, no one else, and I pack as much coffee as possible.
Bec, I'm interested to know, so you arrive at a new hospital or a clinic, what's the very first thing that you do?
Besides going down and saying, hi, I check the emergency trolley, which is something that I do, and my emergency packs is just my go-to thing. After I've said hello to everyone, and of course they've taken you out and introduced you to the community, and you've done all that social stuff, which is always really lovely. And in some of the islands in the Torres Strait, they'll actually wash your feet as part of the welcoming, which is beautiful. And after all of that's done and dusted, I just get to know my environment, and just checking that emergency trolley and emergency packs.
And I guess, what piece of advice would you give to a nurse looking to start working in a remote or rural community?
Don't be afraid to step outside of the norm for what you think nursing in the bush is like. You can not only be treating people, you could be treating animals as well. So expect the unexpected. Go and do your training and keep up to date on everything. It can be a bit tedious at times and expensive, but it's fun. So and it'll put you in a really good spot for when you actually get out there. Be adaptable and learn about the culture that you're in.
Yeah. What about you, Tessa? Do you have any advice for those thinking about getting into this kind of work?
Well, the same thing. As soon as I've met the staff, I always like to go and check the resus trolley, because they're meant to be all the same. They're not. They're meant to be the same in each stage. They're definitely not. Probably the biggest bit of advice is that you do everything here. You do ED work, you do ward work, you sometimes have to get the breakfasts ready, you sometimes have to do the laundry, you make the beds. You have to do everything. If you're just coming out, say if you're a ward nurse only, guess what? You're going to have to do some ED. If you're an ED nurse, guess what? You're going to have to do some ward work. You're going to have to shower people, and you basically do a bit of everything. And I mean, it's a great way you follow the people through from ED into the ward, get to know your community. And I mean, it's lovely. You walk down the street and they're, morning sister, how are you? They get to know you. And the more that you come back to the same communities, they're really happy to see you again. So no, it's great.
And John, what about you? What advice can you offer those thinking about getting into this line of work?
Yeah, much the same as the girls. Be confident, have confidence in yourself. When you turn up at a place, go and introduce yourself. Maybe you get there the day before, go in, introduce yourself, have a look around, check, and then when you start to work, check where all the resus trolleys are, check where everything is, and be prepared to be flexible. As as Tessa said, you'll turn your hand to everything, from making beds, delivering the food, ED, aged care. So just have confidence in yourself, because the ailments, the illnesses that the people have, they're exactly the same as the illnesses that they have in the city. There's there's no difference in that.
So before we go, Naomi, we just have a few more questions. Evelyn asked, what about aged care?
Oh, we do certainly do aged care as well. So yeah, we see contract in that environment. So yeah, we're keen to hear from people. They probably tend to be Queensland, Northern Territory, New South Wales type locations, but yeah, we see aged care contracts come through as well from smaller places to bigger, just as long as they kind of fall under that regional, rural and remote banner.
And do you ever offer short contracts, or how long are the contracts? Erica would like to know.
Yeah, so the contracts can vary. It just depends on why the contract comes up in the first place. So we do definitely see like short, 2 to 3 week contracts come through. But if there's a deficit that's fairly long standing, the longer someone's available for, the better that is for that hospital or that community to have that continuity of staff. One thing we have seen in this last couple of months is that a lot of the remote areas did request people to do contracts of 6 weeks or longer, because that does offer that consistency for the community. The nurse gets to know the community gets to know the nurse, and then it just also reduced that outside exposure with everything that has been going on over that last few months. So the longer people are available, the better. But yeah, shorter contracts do crop up. But yeah, it kind of depends why the gap is there.
Well, I think we could go on all night, but we are out of time. Thank you so much to our panelists. It's been fascinating to hear your stories and learning a little bit more about all the amazing work that you do. And thank you everyone for joining me tonight. Hopefully we've answered most of your questions, but if there is anything that we haven't covered, we're sending you an email tonight with a little bit more information, and should you wish, how to organise a personal consultation with our team. Thanks for joining us. Good night.